Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, February 10th. Great to have you with us this week. The University of Akron and the Akron Public Schools announced a major partnership. Will it actually bring families back into the city because their students can get scholarships? We'll talk about it. Governor Kasich gets witty during his State of the State address, but are his goals reasonable for this second year of his term? Plus, the Board of Elections wants more money, or can they operate with less? That debate is growing. Those stories and more next on NewsNite. Great to have you with us this week and a lot of great topics. Let's meet our panel. Steve Hoffman joins us this week from the Akron Beacon-Journal. Great to see Stephanie Warsmith with us this week, also from the Akron Beacon-Journal. And always great to have Larry States here from WAKR. And we'll get to Governor Kasich and his humor in just a moment. But first, we begin with the University of Akron and the Akron Public Schools. A week ago, we're talking about the University of Akron reeling in Jim Tressel, which really caught a lot of people by surprise. They were able to do it. Now the university and the Akron schools with this plan before the State House. Central Ohio High School goes to the university. Hundreds, possibly thousands of students could get scholarships. Is this really the win-win it appears to be?
I think it is, and I'll tell you why. I know the University of Akron has had designs on Central Ohio High School for a long time. Even before the school closed, they coveted that building. I think what Dr. Proenza had said, they wanted to use that for their early college program. That's probably how it's going to start out, using that building. But I think it's a good thing because of the fact it's an incentive for the Akron public school system. There is some money involved, you know, with these scholarships, obviously. The value of the scholarships, you have to look at that. And I think it's an incentive. It almost is an offshoot of what the mayor wanted to do several years ago when he wanted to start a college scholarship fund for University of Akron and Kent State. Well, here, the University of Akron comes in to the Akron public school system, and that connection, I think, will be a good one because I think it will help the students, maybe give them a little more incentive to say, hey, you know, I can get a free ride at the University of Akron. I need to keep my grades up. That's what Superintendent David James had said. I think it's a good fit for both. And as I said, the Central Howard High is a transitional school right now, while the other schools are being built, a transitional high school. But when that use is over, I think the University of Akron can make good use of that building. And it's right next to their campus. It's a natural fit. But I think that the trade-off of the scholarships is a great idea.
Yeah, we'll see how many students are eligible. I mean, I think the number who would be eligible now is relatively small.
100.
Yeah, yes. And the standards are for the scholarships are reasonably high. I mean, you have to have a certain grade point average, and then they also have ACT scores figured into there at several levels. In other words, your grade point could be lower if your ACT is higher, that sort of thing. I'm not sure the mayor is done with his scholarship thinking, so we'll see what happens with that.
What makes you say that?
Well,
just curious?
No, because he
continues to say that.
He keeps talking about it.
Yeah, he has said that that's his top priority for something that he still wants to get done in his new term that he's just begun. I also think it's worth mentioning with this Central Howard that they are still talking about doing the STEM high school there, and that would be the continuation of the Inventors Hall School that they now have, which has really been a big draw. I mean, I know a lot of parents who have tried, it's a lottery system, to get their kids there. And so I think, the fact that they are talking about that as one of the continued uses for Central Ohio, even if the university takes over that facility, that's another way besides scholarships that you're going to be drawing kids or keeping them in the district.
Yeah, and the thing is, Kent State University many years ago had a high school where they tried this, and it lasted for some time, and then eventually it ended. But I think the University of Akron, this could be sort of a high school that would be an extension for students, as I said, early college or a STEM school where the university has a direct connection, on educating these kids, getting them ready for college, and it could be an extension of the university, although it would be a high school. So I think it would be a good idea. I think for one thing, you have to have some incentive for these kids to want to stay locally, because a lot of them, you can't blame a lot of them, they graduate and then they go outside the area because they think the jobs are there and their future is there. Well, if you want to train them for jobs here, you want to focus in on what's happening in this community, what better way than to give them a scholarship and try to tie that to the fact that, if you go here, we're going to give you a skill that you can use here. You can stay here. And, so you don't, instead of having these students, flights out of the city maybe you can keep them at least in the area, in the region.
Right, it fits in with a lot of the other initiatives that we have going on in town, the University Park Alliance, other initiatives to develop downtown, to develop neighborhoods. And so in the long run, if you can keep families in the city, if you can keep kids in the Akron Public Schools, it sort of builds on what you have. So I think it is a win-win situation, as Larry was saying. And it's an example of what can happen when you have different units of government actually collaborating with each other.
Now, the Central Howard topic is one that was discussed on this program a decade ago. At times there was a number of $20 million thrown around, and clearly had the school sold the building outright, that money would be gone by now. So I think people are weighing in on the value of the students and what keeping them here in the study showed them more likely to live here. Is there a way to include more students? Because there are Akron families who are saying, hey, I still pay taxes to the Akron Public Schools, but I send my kids elsewhere. Should the university look to try to help those students as well, thinking along the same lines of they're more likely to stay here?
Well, I don't know. That's a tough. Right now, the scholarships, as I understand it, are limited to Akron Public School students. I think it would be difficult to go beyond that. You'd get into some tricky questions. And we should say that the legislature is going to have to act on this because right now, charter schools get first dibs in this sort of situation when the school district is unloading a building. So so we'll see how the legislature reacts to this. There are a lot of Republicans in the legislature who like charter schools a lot.
Although it is interesting that Lynn Slaby, a Republican legislator from our area, is the one who has introduced this as championing it. So that might mean that it perhaps has a shot. And I think it's interesting too that this could apply in 2 other urban districts that have similar situations to what could happen with Central Howard here in Akron.
I think you have to. It's a way also to boost the public schools, and since Lynn Slaby, a Republican, has introduced this, it's his bill. I really think that while the charter schools, the Republicans favor the charter schools and the choice the parents have, other parents are not going to have that choice. They're going to have to send their kids to public schools. They're not going to have the money. Even with the vouchers, they may not be able to afford it. So I think what this does, it gives more school systems incentives. I see this spreading beyond Akron. I think they're going to look at Akron as going to be a model. And as you said, the couple of other districts that are involved, this bill could eventually affect other districts down the line. And maybe local universities in those areas could, connect with those school systems. And I really think that's good because you have an incentive for higher education there for these students. They know that there's a goal that if they really get good grades and they really knuckle down and do what they do, that they can have the chance of a scholarship, and maybe their parents could not afford to send them to college otherwise. Well,
one more thing quickly. Ohio's tuition rates are about, they are close to the national average. That's the good news. The bad news about Ohio tuition is that the burden shouldered by students and their families has increased. So we're out of whack in that respect.
What does this say about the leadership, though, involved in these 2 organizations, that they were able to come up with a plan like this? Because this is a collaboration we just haven't seen.
Right. I think that you've seen quite a few examples in recent years of collaborations between the university and the school district here. You have the Inventors Hall School, and that they were partners in that. You have the early college program that Larry mentioned, where students are able to take college classes at the same time that they're finishing up their diplomas. And so you have had a lot of that collaboration. I know that they have a partnership with the Inventors Hall School where teaching people who are learning how to be teachers are working in that environment. So I think this is just a continuation of some really exciting collaborations that have been going on between those 2 groups.
What does this say about the folks in economic development, Greater Akron Chamber, when they go out to market, live in the city of Akron? Does this really give them a magnet to try to get families to move here that maybe are on the bubble?
Sure. It's worked to a degree in Kalamazoo. They have a very widespread scholarship plan, which was funded by I believe, the Upjohn Foundation. So obviously we're not talking about a funding level that would guarantee every student access to higher education. But these plans are, I think that people have moved back into Kalamazoo. There's no doubt about it. It's had an effect. So I think this would be a help.
Do you think so, Larry? The difference between living, let's say, in Copley or Talmadge, or maybe deciding to live in Akron?
Well, let's face it. Akron Public Schools are building all these new school buildings. they need to have students in them, obviously, and the student enrollment has been shrinking in Akron at an alarming rate over the past few years. And this is a way to make the public school system attractive again to families that might be thinking about moving out. Somebody may be living in Akron now saying, well, maybe I want to go out, to a suburban district. Well, if they know that their student has a good shot at getting a scholarship, it's going to be relieving them of a financial burden, I think they might think twice about moving out and maybe keeping their students here and considering still living in Akron and attending Akron public schools. The Akron school system has to fight back in one way or another, because right now, they've been under siege as far as the loss of student population, and you got to stop the bleeding somewhere.
Well, let's talk about that as we move the discussion now over to NewsNite.net.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at NewsNite.net.
If it's one thing politicians get accused of, it's looking at the prompter too long, that little TV thing that puts the words on the screen. I don't use one for this broadcast, but I'm not delivering the State of the State address. John Kasich didn't use one this week, and it sounded like quite an adventure of a speech.
It certainly was. And before we get to the fun stuff, I do want to make one serious point about the State of the State speech. I've covered many of them over the years. They do have an important policymaking function. This is a chance for a governor to consult widely with his cabinet, outside of his cabinet, get their ideas, prioritize them, put them in a speech. Sometimes they're not the most exciting speech, but it's a chance to lay out the policies that the governor wishes to pursue for the coming year. So it's an agenda-setting function. It gives everybody a chance. They're all together. You have access to the public through the media, pretty widespread access. So it's a chance to be reasonably serious, outline an agenda. In that respect, against that backdrop, this speech was a total flop. It was very light on details. It was rambling, at times virtually incoherent. And so it was an unfortunate, an opportunity lost, I would say, for the governor.
You guys agree?
I don't know. Let's put it this way. John Kasich is a very spontaneous speaker, though. You have to give him credit. He is. I mean, he speaks, he shoots from the hip. It was a stark contrast to Ted Strickland, okay? I mean, it's just like night and day. While he was short on details and everything, I think that his speech, it did keep your attention, because you never knew what he was going to say next, who he was going to criticize next, or, but it did keep your attention. I'll give credit for that. Maybe it was short on the details, but it did keep your attention. And he just basically just said, this is, what I want to do, and I'm going to do it, basically. That's what he said. He didn't, as he said, it was short on detail, but at the same time, I think that he, in John Kasich's style, you know what I mean? He just took it over and just, and it was all about what he wants to do. And you're right, Steve, I agree. He didn't really include a lot of input from other sources in his administration.
A little humor in there, Stephanie?
Well, the comment that he made about his hot wife was really classic. I mean, it has to go down in some
right at the beginning.
Right. And so as a hot wife, I do appreciate the fact that, he mentioned that. So, but, it's sort of, I think it kind of started off on the wrong foot because of the controversy over the fact that he held it in Steubenville rather than Columbus, which is a continuation of, a series of decisions he's made since he's been in office, that started with, him not wanting the media there for his swearing in and other things that he's been criticized for. Now he holds us in Steubenville rather than traditionally in Columbus, which is where everyone is, the whole legislature is, already, and the extra expenses involved with that. And then, he takes pot shots at other states, and so I think there's really been more attention focused on, the criticism around, where he held it, and the things that he said or didn't say than the substance of what he was trying to get across.
Here's irony is not quite the right word, but here's an example of what I was talking about earlier. Here you have the governor touching fairly briefly, but touching on this oil and gas drilling boom that's underway in Ohio, the drilling into the shale formations. Fairly controversial. A lot of people are talking about it. The state, in fact, is in the process of updating its regulations on oil and gas drilling. Well, no one's really quite sure exactly what that update is going to look like. There's a lot of concern, widespread concern. Well, you go through the speech, and you go, oh, okay, we want to do this in an environmentally responsible way. there's no detail. Well, later in the week, Mike DeWine, our Attorney General, comes out with a very specific, well-thought-out set of proposals for the legislature to act on to increase fines for violating drilling regulations, to make these companies disclose exactly what's in this fracking fluid, that there are millions of gallons of it that they're injecting underground and then it comes back up, and to bring to landowners a measure of protection to bring them under the Consumer Protection Act. In other words, the state now has no standing if a landowner and a driller get into a fight over a lease, over the terms of a lease. The state can't get involved. This would give the state, under the Consumer Protection Law, a chance to get in and help mediate. And if you don't think there are going to be disputes, I mean, this is happening in Pennsylvania. Chesapeake just got hit in Pennsylvania with like $1 million fine for improper well casings that allowed gas, methane, I think it was methane, but bad things to get into people's water.
So do you take that as the governor didn't know what those plans were, didn't have bullet points for that, or that he just thought he'd remember them off the top of his head and forgot to put them in?
You know what? I have no idea, but either way, it's not good.
I mean, I use a 3x5 card for a few notes for this broadcast. A lot of times we come up here with nothing. Is that the right thing to do, though, when you're the governor and everybody's looking to you for these directions, to wing it like this?
I think what he was trying, what his style is, the Kasich style is to shoot from the hip and let the details come in later. And that's what happened with Mike DeWine, okay, this Attorney General. Okay, I'm going to just do the window dressing here, and then my department heads are going to fill in. Okay, in the weeks down the road, you're going to hear about all the specific details about what I was talking about. I think that's been his style, and I think he's following that script.
But if the purpose of the speech annually is to provide clarity and leadership and vision, and instead it provides confusion and fog and wait till next episode, did he really accomplish anything in his speech?
He was addressing a pep rally for his administration. That's basically what he was doing. Okay, that was the Kasich style. If you watch that speech and listen to it, it was a rah-rah speech for Ohio. That's basically what it was. No detail, short on detail, but all the things that he wants to do. Now let's see if his administrators, who are in charge of these departments, come out with specific details and say, "Remember when the governor mentioned this? Okay, this is how we're going to do it." I don't know if that's going to happen.
I have no problem at all with governors going places. I mean, as Stephanie knows, because she was in Columbus. Governors like to get out on the road. All elected politicians like to get out on the road. It's great. So I have no problem with John Kasich going to this school in Steubenville and praising its ability to get good results with a modest amount of money. But again, this is the state of the state. It has a function, a historic function. It has its traditions and it has its reasons. And he just, ignored it, said really nothing substantive about education. We're supposed to fix education. That's another thing he wants to fix. He wants to fix education. Well, we have no idea how. Funding has been cut. We know that. But, I mean, what's the plan? I really honestly don't know, and I follow this stuff daily. I really don't know where he's headed. We'll find out maybe this year.
At some point he might do this.
But considering the national attention he drew with Senate Bill 5 during his first year in office, weren't we expecting more substance? I mean, the precursor to this speech was, get out of my way, I've got big ideas. Weren't we expecting more?
I wasn't just based on what he had done in the past, what I'd heard from him in the past, the way his style. I heard him speak to the I think it was the Akron Roundtable here a few months ago, and it was the same approach. And I said, well, that's his script. That's what he sticks to, and he doesn't vary from it very much. He's trying to serve more as a cheerleader, short on details, but he tries to stir people up. And then at the same time, though, it's up to his department heads to take care of this stuff. I really think that let's put it this way, he has been a big hit on the national talk shows on television about wiping out Ohio's $8 billion budget deficit. I've seen him everywhere talking about that. He's been in demand over the past 6 months. How did you do it? Our state can't do it, that type of thing. He was short on the details in discussing that. He said, well, we just did it, but he never described how they did it, how many programs they cut or where, what they did. But at the same time, everybody seemed to be eating up what he was saying.
And he didn't, he referred again to some of the ideas that he's had, like leasing the turnpike. But he didn't say, we're going to do this. He just said, we're still considering that. We're looking at it. So we still don't know what's going to happen, or what he wants to see happen with some of the major outstanding issues like that.
Well, you're right about you never know what he's going to say. I can tell you in television, we always make sure the camera light is red and that we're recording. I remember he was asked one time about does he support President Obama's plan for Lake Erie and putting these wind turbines up there for green jobs, and he said no. And then he started extrapolating, and then he finally came to the conclusion that, well, you know what, actually, I don't have a lot of details on that. And I thought, well, why did you say no? Why didn't you say, you know what, I need to look into that? But he immediately just said, no, I don't think it's a good idea. And then later minute, he knew nothing about it. So we always make sure we're rolling, that's for sure. It gives us plenty to talk about, including right here on Newsnight.
On NewsNite.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNite.net.
There is great disagreement at the Summit County Board of Elections on what to do with its budget, how many jobs to keep, maybe even how many precincts to keep. But they are at diametrically opposite ends. And I don't know, Stephanie, if we see any real collaboration here, at least from your reporting, of what's going to happen.
Well, the one thing I can tell you, Eric, is that their meetings continue to get longer. I believe that this may have been one of the longest meetings of theirs that I had attended, 3.5 hours long. And so that's not a good thing, in my opinion, if you want it. But yes, they do not seem at this point, at least, to have a consensus on how are they going to live within the lesser budget that the county is willing to give them. And so the Republicans are saying, look, you know, this is what you want to give us. Here's what we think we should do. And they are talking about some sweeping changes, drastically cutting the number of precincts, getting rid of the district poll worker coordinators who have these jobs where they work part-time to get full-time benefits, and then not having an outside place for people to go and in-person absentee vote in the November election.
That's what the Republicans want to cut.
That's what the Republicans want to do. Now, the Democrats, we haven't heard a lot of details on what they are saying at this point, except for they're saying that the board should look at how they're using part-time workers. Right now, they have them doing a couple of kind of special projects, updating registrations and trying to get up to date on their campaign finance audits. And they think that they're spending a lot on that, and they're wondering if now's the time to be doing that when they have less money to work with. And it is a presidential election year.
We got to say, even with Russ Pry's original budget proposal, which was over $4 million.
Yes.
That is still more than Lucas and Montgomery County are planning on spending. Those are counties of similar size, and these studies that are going back, the board did its study of costs, and the county is doing a study, and both those studies are based on comparable counties. So we're still not quite there. The Republican proposal, the threat is that, as we all know, you have 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats on the Board of Elections. Well, John Husted, the Ohio Secretary of State, who's a Republican, in a tie would break the tie. So Alex Arshenkoff is pushing forward with his version of this budget cut. He may not, I don't think he's quite stated that threat so baldly, but everybody understands that if push comes to shove, John Husted will break the tie. So it's hard, it's no accident here that I think everyone agrees these district poll workers got to go. I mean, nobody else does this, and they're all politically connected people anyway. So everybody realizes this has got to go. But this is still not addressing many, many key issues, including the use of part-timers, including the number of employees is still high in Summit County. But, of course, the Republicans are anxious to cut off access to voting, if they can do it, by drastically reducing the number of precincts and closing off an outside voting center, which is also a point of access. So it's no accident, in my opinion, that their proposal is headed in that direction.
But so viewers understand, when you say fewer precincts, that means fewer places for people to actually go vote?
Yes.
Well, it means that, yes, and likely in both Montgomery and Lucas County, they have done this. This is one of the ways that they have achieved savings there. They have about 100 fewer precincts than Summit does at this point. They also cut the polling places. Mm-hmm. So that means that there's more voters in each precinct, and you ultimately could end up with longer lines, things like that you don't want to end up on TV for on Election Day. So, but both of those counties have made those reductions since 2009. They haven't had really long lines or any bad publicity that has come with that since then, but they also have not gone through a presidential election. So I think that they don't even know, what the outcome or result of that is going to be. And so the Democrats on the board are saying we shouldn't be doing this in between a primary and a general, presidential election. That's not how those other boards did it.
But Larry, you only have so much money. You only have so much money.
You only have so much money. And another thing, too, do they really need the number of employees they have at the board? I mean, if you walk into that place, it is just packed with employees. And I'm thinking, well, what do all these people do? Has there really been an accounting on exactly what they do, whether that job could be folded into somebody else's job to do? Also, party affiliation. I mean, why do you have to have so many Democrats and so many Republicans? I understand both parties are very sensitive to that. But, do you have to have so many Democrats and so many Republicans and they have to have matched number-wise, employees? What about the jobs that are given to these people for political favors? I thought that the Elections Board was supposed to be nonpartisan as far as, letting people vote. That's what its main purpose is. Why do we have to have, so much political infighting on which happens at almost every Elections Board meeting? You have the Republican idea versus the Democrat. They clash a lot of times. Why, and why do you have to have the number of employees there, so many Democrats and so many Republicans? Why is party affiliation that critically important? I don't understand the reasoning behind all of that.
Well, with only a minute to go, is there any chance Russ Pry is going to suddenly find extra money for the board?
I don't.
It does not sound like it. He did send a letter to the board this week. They had asked for an extra $200,000 roughly for this first 3 months because they put him on a quarterly budget, and the county said no.
I think the next step in this ongoing saga, and it's really too bad, got to get this out here. It's really too bad we didn't start down this path in a more serious way years ago. But it is what it is. The Democrats will have their counterproposal. So my guess is ultimately we're going to end up spending, we might end up spending somewhere around what we spent in the last presidential election, maybe a little less, which would be around 7.
And one thing you don't want to do is make the national headlines for the whole national election, hedging on votes being counted correctly in Summit County.
No, we don't want to be there.
Not that hasn't happened somewhere in America before. Larry, Stephanie, Steve, thank you very much for being with us, and thank you to you as well. Remember, you can watch this entire broadcast again and also read our blog, see behind the scenes, even the extended discussions over on NewsNite.net. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you next week right here on Friday for News Night. I'll learn to talk by then. Good night.